Welcome to the 80-20 Baseball Podcast. TRYOUTS! The 80-20 Coaching Masterclass. Our weekly get-together where coaches go from new to good and good to great. Mastering the fundamentals and the art of coaching.
Welcome 80-20 baseball listeners. I am always pumped to be here with all of you. Our weekly get-together, coming together with the goal of being great coaches as efficiently as possible because, hey, we just have a small window of time as coaches at the youth level, and we want to make it count. And I know all of you here listening to this week in and week out want to be great. So speaking of great, big shout out to all you coaches that are buying the coaching plan, the 80-20 baseball coaching plan right there on the homepage, 8020baseball.com. Everything you need to be a great coach at the youth level, unbeatable price. 7 years ago when I first started to build out the coaching plan, the 80-20 baseball coaching system, I got a call from a coach at a well-regarded, well-respected high school program in Southern California. He knew that I was putting together this coaching plan, this coaching system. At the time, all I had built out was the dynamic warm-up routine, the throwing program, throwing routine, and the strength and agility / athleticism routine. And he said, I want to have you come implement it with my entire program. So I went down there with 60 plus kids at one time, implemented it. It was his freshman team, his JV team, and his varsity team. He asked me how much I charge, and I said, you know what? I don't have a price on it yet. So I said, what do you think's fair? I trusted him. One of the most honest, upfront coaches I ever worked with. And without hesitation, he said, $750 is fair. So that's what he paid me to implement essentially 10% of the coaching plan. That's available for a fraction of that price at 8020baseball.com. So you get 90% more than that, all hubbed in one spot, easy to access. The feedback has been outstanding. Speaking of outstanding, we have part 2 of our interview with Coach Adam SARANCIK today. Coach SARANCIK's content is always outstanding. The audio, again, is a little spotty on Adam's end, but you shouldn't have any problems following along with what we're talking about. In part 2 of the interview today, Coach SARANCIK discusses his tryout scoring system, his note-taking strategies. We also discuss where there might be a place for uncoachable kids that we see at tryouts. We also discuss the importance of position versatility when it comes to picking our players at tryouts. And we talk about a few other things in today's episode. So this is part 2 of 2. In the show notes, I will link Coach SARANCIK's webpage. He's coming out with a new book. He sent it over to me a few days ago, a draft. What I've read so far is outstanding. He wants to get my input on it. So that'll be coming out soon. I'll link all that in the show notes. With that said, let's dive in. What are some drills that you found that work, or what environments, specific environments, have you found to work really well for tryouts?
So if you have a couple of coaches that say, we can coach pitching, we'll put them in charge of pitching at tryouts and see how they do, and have the varsity coach watch them, or have somebody who really understands pitching. Maybe it's a local pitching trainer who understands pitching, watch them coach. And you're not going to say you can't coach pitching. Maybe they need some training about how to go about teaching pitching. And the same thing with the other coaches. I think we need to help these coaches out be better coaches. They want to be better as well. As far as drills and, specifics, things like that, let me just say this. Let me just give you some resource, okay? Anything that Coach Lou Colon does, Colon, go on YouTube and look at all his videos and how he coaches, say, infielders, and the way he breaks it down from the teaching process, like I said, the 6-step process, starting with drive mechanics, whatever. Mirror that. But he uses a lot of discs and cones and hexagons and things like that. And he works on body movement first. However you're going to do it at practice, and hopefully when it comes to, say, infield play, you mirror what he does, do that at tryouts. That's my point. Run it just like you're going to run practices and see how your players respond. Coach, you and I know, if you really know baseball and you really know how to teach, I do this with a lot of the players. The bird first say, I'll just hand them a bat and say, swing this bat for me. I only need to see you swing it once or twice before I can tell whether you know what you're doing or not. Same thing with fielding the baseball. I only have to see you go through your process, your pre-fielding process and your fielding process and your reception process and your throwing process once or twice, and I can tell whether you know what you're doing. So the drills themselves, I don't really feel are that specific. What I do feel is important is get away from lines, have lots of help, lots of stations, lots of things going on, and lots of evaluators who know what they're doing so that these kids kids are constantly moving, constantly engaged, and you're setting the tone for how practices are going to be. All right. The other thing I'll just say is two things. Number one, we don't assess athleticism enough. It should be a part of every practice, and it should be a part of every tryout. Shuttle runs, speed ladders, agility things with discs and cones, to where we're really assessing where are we at in two things. Number one, where are the players at athletically? The best athletes have the most potential to be the best players. And where am I at in my ability to demonstrate it, teach it to these kids? I think leagues make a huge mistake in not saying, how are we going to progress these players that we're asking to play multiple sports as athletes during this year and year to year? By the way, one of the biggest flaws in youth baseball is the inconsistency of information that players are getting from team to team, year to year. They'll get one set of fundamentals when it comes to throwing, receiving, hitting a baseball, and another the following year. They're getting inconsistent messages because the coaches in the leagues aren't on the same page when it comes to how to teach it. The other thing, so we're not teaching and assessing enough athleticism in tryouts. And secondly, we're not assessing reaction as well as action. So everything, even in dynamic movement stuff, should be incorporating reaction. You can have the best throwing mechanics in the world, but if you can't react and then move to get to the ball, they don't do you any good. So learn to incorporate at tryouts that piece as well, so they don't carry over in the season as well. But I don't have a lot of things that I say are specific to tryouts for assessment, because I don't really think that it's necessary to say that this person's exit velo off the bat is this. I know what I'm seeing. So same thing, throwing velocity. I don't have to put a radar gun or a pocket radar on somebody and see how fast they're throwing. You can look at their mechanics. You can see the velocity. I'm more interested in the kids' willingness to work to get better and my confidence in my coaching to help them get better. Yes, it's all relative. If you're in a league team, you want the 12 best and 15 best kids. I don't know that there's any specific drills that are going to assess it better than others. Maybe some coaches say put a ball in a tee and hit it into the screen 20 feet away and measure the exit velocity. Well, you know what that is? That's really fun for especially older kids. That's a lot of fun. But does that really help you? Let me just put it this way. If you need that to determine who your best players are, then you're not as experienced or as good a coach as you think you are. You shouldn't need that to be able to determine who your best players are. But I do think that a lot of stations doing the fundamentals of throwing, fielding, hitting are important, and having a lot of qualified people out there.
So for those coaches that are not engaged in the tryout, maybe they're off to the side, it's pretty easy for them to take notes. For those coaches that are in the middle of it, running everything, teaching, coaching, how do they take notes effectively and efficiently?
Yeah. Like I said before, I work with partners in pairs. You may have somebody that's a great note taker, understands baseball, but really doesn't understand the detail that you're looking for when evaluating it. So they've got the evaluation sheet, they're holding on to it. I'm coaching and I'm commenting on the players, and they're taking notes for me when I'm running things. I don't take time and stop. I have evaluators taking my notes for me while I'm out there coaching. Let's get specific. You have 25 kids out there and you have evaluators, 5 coaches coaching and 5 evaluators taking notes for the coach. If you got 5 stations with 5 players at a station and you've got a coach and evaluator at every station, you're only evaluating 5 at a time. I'm evaluating 5 at a time. It doesn't take that long. These 5 kids at this station line up and whatever your criteria are. You don't evaluate 20 at a time. You want to evaluate 5, that's not difficult. Just have somebody help you take the notes.
So those kids that are not teachable, that are not thirsty to learn, they're not looking to get better, they're not coachable. We need to note who those kids are. So do you turn to your evaluator next to you and say, not this kid, or do you just say it out loud, cross him off the list? You have to be real honest. And how do you say that out loud when the kid's right there?
You're going to keep the kid in a station or that's away from you, fielding the ground ball, fielding the fly ball. Maybe the hitting station, you're going to have to take a few steps back. You just look at the clipboard and you run your finger across this thing and you whisper away from the kid 1 through 5. If he did really well, he's a 5. If he didn't, he's a 1 or a 2. That's all you need to say. You just keep it in code, and except for hitting, everything else you can stand away and make your comments. Pitching, catching, you don't have to stand right next to them while you're telling your helper what the evaluation process is. Sometimes I don't have help. I have the clipboard. I'll just mark it down myself. If I'm only doing 5 at a time, I can take notes on 5 at a time while I'm coaching. You can take the notes yourself. There are ways of keeping it confidential. And again, if a player doesn't have that teachable spirit and the growth mindset, it's not an automatic eliminator. It's just information of one of many things that you're going to have to consider for your team and the purpose of your team. As we talked before. I mean, the kids are just learning the game. They're not going to have a great growth mindset right now because baseball is hard. It's going to get frustrating. We're not going to eliminate a kid because of that growth mindset if he's just learning the game. But if this is your elite team that you're going to travel and play the best teams with, that person doesn't handle things well. And it turns out, you're choosing between him as your number 11 or 12 player and somebody else's number 11 or 12 player. You might want to know that this kid's going to be a struggle the whole time. I think this kid over here who has the growth mindset, I want him as my number 11 or 12 guy, not the other one.
Would you ever cross a kid off the list just completely based off of something you saw that was very blatant, something that you did not want as part of your team? Or do you just give them a low score on that?
No, you never eliminate a kid as a kid. I'll tell you who I eliminated. Eliminate the parent. Kids are kids. They're just learning. I mean, part of your job as a coach is to coach them up to help them have a more teachable spirit in the way you go about coaching them and help them have a better growth mindset. The player that I worry most about, and you may want to get some history if you can, let's just say you're coaching middle schoolers, you might want to talk to the coaches who have these kids as players on younger teams. How are the parents to deal with? Because sometimes your biggest problems are not with the players, it's with the parents. And that's why I say these meetings with the parents are so important because I can work with any kid. I'm not sure I can work with any parent who really has a different idea about the playing time for their son, the amount of games we're going to play, availability of their son because he's also a quarterback in football and a starting point guard in basketball. Those are the things that I might want to know that potentially, mutually, we might agree this isn't the best team for your son. You see what I'm saying? That's why I think you need to have more meetings leading up to the tryouts than just one. And the parents need to be a part of it because I want to know you're not just drafting a player, you're drafting parents too. And they can be a real challenge. And it's getting more of a challenge as time goes on. We keep coming up with different names for them, right, Coach? We call it helicopter parents, snowplow parents. But no, I'm not cutting a kid. I'm trying to get on the same page about where's the best place where this kid's going to thrive, going to be happy, going to have fun. And I'll say 80% of the players out there would have a lot more fun if we changed the traditional way of playing the games where all players bat every inning. We had no strikeouts, no walks. I mean, every player put the ball in play, after a certain number of pitches. That's the level of engagement for much of the year that I think a lot of players would prefer as opposed to, well, I might get a fly ball every 3 games, right? We might have one game in the year where we actually had more hits and RBIs than errors and walks. I think we need to take a whole look of the kind of games that we're asking these kids to play and whether they really feel like they're having the most fun in those games and whether we can, do another for at least part of the year and for some of the players at certain levels, maybe not at all levels, but at certain levels. But I think that was a whole other podcast. But no, we're trying to get them slotted into the right spots and they're going to thrive and be happy and have fun.
Staying the same is something, I look at Little League and I talk to a lot of coaches and people on the board for little leagues and they wonder why kids are leaving in droves to go other places. And it's like, well, you've stayed the same and you haven't done much and you haven't changed the game much. It's still the same. You haven't looked to improve very much. Do you think those parents really want to drive an hour or 30 minutes to go play for the team instead of the one in their backyard? And do you think they even want to spend that money that they got to put on a credit card to pay $200 a month to go play for this X, Y, and Z team? Think they would just rather play for the local Little League?
Fortunately, the answer to that is, yeah, they would, because there's 2 things that are going on. They're chasing trophies and fancy uniforms and medals, tournament titles and things like that. And number 2, they think that because they play in those kind of tournaments and winning in those kind of tournaments, that their son is actually getting better. And it's going to someday pay off with a college scholarship. And then they have a rude awakening when they finally get evaluated by a college coach and you say, I'm sorry, but your son's just not that good. Well, wait a minute. He played on the best club teams and the best teams, his entire youth, and he was all state. Said, well, I'm sorry, he's just not that good. But yeah, there are parents out there that will drive their kids or push their kids to be on these teams because they think that's fun. They think that's going to be long-term what's best for their kid. But I understand your point. We shouldn't have to have that as the standard. We should have development, engagement for all kids, regardless of socioeconomic status, To do that, we've got to get to open their minds that there might be a better way of doing things. Because you're right, Coach, kids are leaving. I mean, think about how kids are growing up today and how things are different. I mean, my 3-year-old grandson the other day in the car yells from the backseat, "Hey, Papa, do we have Wi-Fi in this area?" He's 3 years old, all right, and he's worried about Wi-Fi. That's fine. But that's what they're growing up with. They're growing up with computer games and stations that are all about reaction and fast-paced interactivity. And now you're going to go ask them to play traditional baseball, which has just so much standing around and stuff. And you're going to ask them to have fun, and you're going to ask them to stand in lines and practice and between innings or, before games. This isn't fun for them because they haven't grown up with that in their lives. They've grown up with a completely different stand for what is fun. This is what I'm saying. Times have changed. Kids are changing, right? If we want to continue to help this grow, we have to go about and do things differently, for sure.
Yeah, there's always going to be those kids that want to travel and just play with elite talent. Well, before any of this travel ball existed back in the early 90s, mid 90s, there were teams that would form so the top kids in every county could play, like the top 12 kids in every county could play together against the top. So there's always going to be that. But now it's everybody's going to these, and it's not even top kids. And I think those people are chasing different things. Back to the question about cutting the kids at tryouts. I asked you, would you just cross a kid off the list at tryouts? That was actually a test because I would never cross a kid off the list. The parent, that's a different topic, and we could probably break that down on a whole podcast. You could go either way. Like, hey, this parent is such a problem. These parents are such problems. I cannot afford to have that kid on my team because it will ruin the rest of the experience for the rest of the kids. So I get that. I think that's a league problem. And I think the leagues need to be stepping in and putting these parents in check more and be a little bit more firm with that and transparent about what's expected. So that was a little bit of a test. And this kind of brings me to my next thing. There's two ways of looking at tryouts. There's looking at the traditional way, right? Is pick the best kid or pick the most coachable kid, right? Look for the kid that has a thirst for learning, that wants to be coachable, right? I'll challenge that and say, what if we look for the kids that are not like that because we feel like we can reach them? Because there are so many kids that are not coachable, that have underlying root issues. They need a coach that can get to them and that can reach them. I feel like there's two major categories here. There's the prima donna, who's better than everybody. Their dad tells them they're better than everybody. They got all the gear and they're prima donnas. And then there are the kids who have resentment towards authority. Those are the kids I love to get on my team because I know they actually deep down want to listen. They want to be loved. And they have resentment probably because they got let down by adults in their life. So I actually look for those kids. So I don't always cross off kids that are not coachable. But if I feel like they have some underlying issues and I can identify that, I might put them on my team because I know I have a better chance of helping them have a fun year and stick with baseball long term than other coaches who are just gonna be like, I don't have time for this kid. You know what? Maybe I'm the coach for that kid that can really change them. So just another way of kind of looking at it.
Everything you just said, Coach, wouldn't this be wonderful when it came time to the draft? If these kind of frank conversations went on about what do we really want? This is going back to my first point. What's the purpose of this team? All right. Are we going to evaluate a successful season by one loss record? Is that what's really going to be important here? Or do we realize that we coach people, not sports? It's the quality of the person, not the player, that's the most significant outcome. So wouldn't it be wonderful if all the coaches, however many they are, had that kind of conversation and we're frank with one another? Coach Bo says, you know what? I'll take that kid because I think I can help that kid. Another coach saying, no, I'm not sure I'm the right coach for that kid. But you've got to have a conversation with the parents too, not only that kid, but generally on the team saying, you know what? I'll be honest with you. This is what this team's going to be all about. We may not have the best record at the end of the year, but you know what? I'm going to make sure these kids grow as people, as athletes, and as players. They're going to be better in all of those ways at the end of the year. Are you okay with that approach? Who are we? What's the purpose of this team? How can we reach these kids to make sure that they're engaged and they're actually developing? This is why you can't sit in the stands. You have to interact with these kids and figure this out, not for cutting purposes, but to figure out what's the best fit for this player, developmentally, athletically, and chemistry-wise with the coach. And you have to interact with these kids to be able to determine that. So you're absolutely spot on. And now we're getting at what youth sports should be about. Nobody's going to care 10 years from now who was the second place team in your division. They're either going to have had a good experience and have grown as a person and player and remember how you made them feel, or they didn't. You are absolutely right on, Coach. This is exactly the kind of thing But this takes planning. Now, one small little caveat here. This is why I think we need to go to a different model of how we're playing at the middle and lower levels. Baseball, you and I know, is not like basketball, not like soccer. You got to be able to throw the ball over the plate or nothing happens. We can't take 10 kids with a great attitude and needs help with growth mindset or whatever, and we don't have anybody that can't throw a strike and catch a strike. It's just not going to be fun. And honestly, that's the norm at the lower levels. I mean, walk, stolen base, score on either an error or a wild pitch or pass ball. Over and over and over again. Count the number of actual successful, clean baseball plays that are made in a youth baseball game, and they are the minority, by far the minority. You may not even get more than 2 or 3 in an entire game at the 8 to 12-year-old level at the lower levels. But you do have to have a way of putting the ball over the plate and making sure that the ball is put in play over and over and over again so kids are getting the opportunity to make baseball plays. So there has to be a certain level of competence and ability built in to how we're playing the game. So that's the only caveat there. But absolutely, coach, just like you have coaches that are better at teaching pitching or catching, you also have coaches with certain backgrounds. I mean, I've got 2 adopted kids, and my life experience with them and our family makes me uniquely qualified to coach a certain kind of kid. And you may have the same thing as an educator. Well, those are some of the things that the league should know. And we should be trying to pair kids up with coaches like that. So kids are going to have a good experience as opposed to the hard line, well, I'm going to teach you, my way or the highway, and we're going to respect authority and, blah, 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 blah. That's not going to be a good experience for that kid, right? So yeah, absolutely, coach. You're right on.
At tryouts, looking for the best fit rather than position or the athlete. Like, look for the kid that's the best fit, not just the best fit for the team, but also from a player's needs. And I will say this, when you have players at tryouts and you're scared a little bit, maybe as a coach, and you're a little hesitant to put them on your team, maybe you saw something at tryouts that was a red flag. I truly don't believe you need to have some unique skill set to give love, to care. All right. Here's the thing. You got to love and you got to have patience. My point here is, and I'm not going to break it down on this podcast, but I could lay out, there's 3 to 4 things you need to do. It's really something you can learn in about 5 minutes and then go out and work through it. But you don't need a lot of tools to just love a kid, make them feel cared for, show some interest in them, ask questions about their life, ask a follow-up question about them, learn about them. Also, when they act a fool or they're acting up, where's that behavior stemming from? Where's that coming from? Don't attack the kid, go after the behavior. I do want to go back into tryouts here and kind of finish strong with some tryout stuff. Coach, do you look at position versatility? Does position versatility interest you? Is that something you look for? Is it certain levels or no?
So number one, for all the players listening out there, whenever somebody asks you what positions do you play, the answer is always whatever position or positions I need to play to help the team win. Okay, that's always the answer. You need to back that up by actually having played multiple positions. So again, if we can get away from this judging success solely by win-loss records, we need to give kids a chance to play multiple positions so that they are versatile. Okay, it's going to make them more valuable to every team that they're going to play on from now until whenever. So versatility, absolutely a huge priority. Every kid, especially at the middle and lower levels, who wants to pitch or catch should be coached up and be given a chance to pitch catch. Those are the key positions on the team. Anyway, anybody who's worked hard at it, put in the time, should be a chance pitch and catch. I had a kid not so many years ago, 9-year-old kid with nerve damage in his hand, could hardly hold a baseball, but he absolutely wanted to pitch and was willing to work at it. He turned out to be one of our most effective pitchers. He didn't throw the hardest, but because of his attitude and his grit to be successful, he turned out to be one of our best pitchers. So versatility is huge. When it comes to versatility too, if you've got athletes, right, if you've done a good job in assessing and developing the athleticism of your team, you're going to make them versatile. There are college programs that only recruit shortstops because those many times are the best athletes on the team, and they're going to convert them to pitchers, center fielders, and other positions because they're that versatile, right? I mean, they're that athletic. So I don't ever worry about versatility right away. I do need a core group that can throw strikes and catch strikes. You're always going to need a pitcher or two, especially if you're going to have to play traditional baseball. Okay, so that's a key. But everybody else, you're going to be able to develop players that can play other positions. I think if I had to stress one thing to finish up here, Coach, I'm going to finish where I started, and that is You need more people involved, both in the evaluation process and the coaching process than you currently have. You need more qualified coaches, you need more people evaluating, and you need to start much earlier and have many more planning meetings about who we are, why we exist, and what we're going to do at Tryouts traditionally had. I mean, basically, they put it on the website, Facebook page, sign up if you want to be a coach or an assistant coach, see how many, sign up. You have one coaches meeting with the league or whatever. This is how we're going to run tryouts. And it's kind of usually the same way that it's been done year after year after year. And they either don't want to take the time to change because they're basing their evaluation of success on all the wrong things. That's what I would recommend, is that you do things differently. You need more people and you need more time to do things differently.
We have to first outline our priorities.
Yeah.
Then from there, ask, is what we're doing now, is there a better way to align it with our priorities?
Yep. Getting everybody on the same page. We've got to get the league to have not what is just successful for this year, but year to year. How are we going to develop these kids as athletes, as people, and as players? We should have a plan. And if we're not qualified to teach athleticism, we need to hire somebody or ask somebody to come in and design a program for athleticism that we can do in 15, 20 minutes every practice. All right. So how are we going to progress them as people and as athletes and as players this year and from year to year, so that we have a plan for their development and the messaging is consistent? Because otherwise you're going to have one group of coaches telling these kids one thing, and the next year they're going to hear something different. It's not going to lead to optimum development. It's going to be frustrating for the kids.
This came to mind just now. I was looking at my list here. Catching and pitching. How much do you prioritize catchers and pitchers? How would you prioritize them at tryouts?
Yeah, it's a reality of baseball. If you're going to play traditional baseball, you have to have a way of strikes being thrown. And if you don't, you need to change the way you play the game. So you've got coach pitch, hitting off a tee, machine pitch, whatever. But in my leagues, we wouldn't have strikeouts. We wouldn't have walks. We would have the ball be put in play. At the higher levels, if you've got an elite level team and your purpose is to play tournaments and play against the best teams, you better have evaluators that understanding pitching and pitching mechanics and kids that are willing to learn from you, because you can't do anything in baseball in the traditional sense without great pitching and catching. It all starts with that. So it has to be a priority. If that's your model for how you're going to play the game, the traditional model at all levels, then you're going to have to figure out how we're going to put a certain number of players on every team that have a shot at throwing strikes, or else it's just not going to be fun for everybody.
Look for what the kid could be, not necessarily what you see right in front of you right then. Try to project a little. Other coaches may miss the real value of a kid, so look to see if there's undervalued kids and opportunities.
That's why coaches have to be involved in the tryout process itself and can't be in the stands, because all you have to do is ask the kid, hey, you know what? You really work hard. I really appreciate how hard you work. You love to get dirty. You love to grind. And, your basic throwing mechanics and receiving mechanics are really good. You ever played catcher before? No. Would you be willing to try if I could teach you? Sure, coach. There's the growth mindset. There's the teachable spirit that you're looking for. It doesn't have to be a catcher right now. You're interacting with this kid and you get an opportunity to coach him and work with them and talk with them as a part of the tryout process. And now you say, well, I can develop that kid into being a catcher. Just exactly what you're saying. But that's why the coaches have to be involved and actually coach during the tryout process, because all this valuable information is there.
So coaches, parents, board members, league presidents, get going with your tryouts now. Start planning now. Get some things in place so you can run an effective tryout. Listen to these tips and take these recommendations Coach SARANCIK has shared and see how you can get those infused into your league or organization's tryouts. Anything you want to add? Any parting messages, Coach?
Just appreciate you and everything you do week in and week out and all the content you put out. I appreciate all the coaches' time that they're putting into being the best that they can be, and administrators and everybody involved, because, all their hearts are in the right places. We appreciate everything that they're doing. All we're trying to do is, maybe open some minds, and there might be some other ways of doing things. And maybe down the road, maybe in the summer, I just wrote an article that was published in coachesinsider.com called The 10 Most Important Things a Coach Should Do in the Off Season. So once we get near the end of the season and coaches are thinking about how to get ready for the next one to do even better, that might be a topic that we can go through.
Let's do it. You got me pumped up about it already. We appreciate all of you coaches. What we're trying to do is make it easier for you to be successful. That's why we're here. And I appreciate you, Coach SARANCIK. I can't wait to have you on again.
Thanks, Coach. Look forward to it.
All right, that wraps up our interview with Coach Adam SARANCIK, a wealth of knowledge, and he's coming out with that new book soon. I'll keep you posted on that. His website is linked in the show summary, show notes. Don't forget to head over and get the 80/20 baseball coaching plan, the coaching system. You get immediate access to it, and the checkout process is as seamless as possible. I'm really pumped. We're going to start a 5-part series. We're going to discuss something I've heard nowhere else in the baseball community. We're going to discuss the 5 phases of an at-bat. We're going to talk about how to coach each of these 5 phases, which of the phases we should start with. I'll share tips for each of the phases. I am really pumped to start this 5-part series. Over the next 5 weeks, we'll break down a phase every week, but I'm also going to add in an additional tip that's not part of this series. I'm going to layer on a bonus tip strategy into each episode. So the next 5 will be fantastic, double doubles, animal style. All right, everyone, let's keep taking care of our health so we can be at our best for our families, our close friends, our players. Let's take this information out there and make the youth baseball experience much better for all those players and kids that we're leading. All right, y'all, take care. And until next week, adios.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Podcast, the 80/20 Baseball Masterclass. We got this. Now, let's take the field.